Hello everyone, this is Dr. Madhusudan Rao and the program I teach medical students. Today I talk on the topic fetal circulation. Well, fetal circulation is the circulatory system during fetal life. You know the adult circulatory system, the heart and the blood vessels. The heart in the adults is a four-chambered organ with two atria and two ventricles. Right atrium receives the venous return by the superior vena cava and through the inferior vena cava. Left atrium receives the oxygenated blood from the lungs via the pulmonary veins. Whereas in the fetuses, the circulatory system is something different because lungs are non-functional. So it has the placenta playing the role of lungs during the fetal life. So there are certain important structures in the fetal heart like foramen ovale, and there are vascular structures like ductus arteriosus and ductus venosus in the fetal circulatory system, which are very important during the fetal life. There are umbilical vessels like one umbilical vein and two umbilical arteries, and placenta playing an important role as a role of lungs during the fetal life. So we try to touch upon these aspects of fetal circulation to understand clearly. This is how it is. We'll touch briefly on fetal heart and blood vessels, about the umbilical vessels and the fetoplacental unit. This picture shows the various aspects of fetal circulation. Well, we try to know about the fetal heart. Fetal heart is again a four-chambered structure with two atria and the two ventricles. Right atrium receives the venous blood from the superior vena cava as it happens in the adults. Superior vena cava draining the head and neck and the upper extremities brings the deoxygenated blood to the right atrium, which empties its blood through the tricuspid valve into the right ventricle. This is similar to the adult circulation and this part of the fetal circulation. Next, right atrium receives the venous blood from the inferior vena cava, okay, which is drained by the ductus venosus coming from the umbilical vein. Okay, inferior vena cava as such empties into the right atrium. From the right atrium, the blood flows to the left atrium directly through the foramen ovale, an important structure in the fetal heart. And a part of this inferior vena cava blood is pumped into the right ventricle. Well, coming to the right ventricular output, it is around the 55% of the total ventricular output. Out of this 55% of the right ventricular output, only 5% is ejected into the pulmonary circulation because lungs are immature The pulmonary vascular resistance is very high, much higher than the systemic vascular resistance. So the blood from the right ventricle is pumped into the pulmonary trunk as usual, but it is shunted into the aorta, the descending aorta, through ductus arteriosus. This is again an important vascular structure, a feature of fetal circulation. Next aspect. So that means the fetal heart has got the 4 chambers as it is there in the high adults. So right atrium receives the venous return from the superior vena cava, a deoxygenated blood from the upper extremities, a mixed blood from the inferior vena cava, that is inferior vena caval blood mixed with the blood of the umbilical vein through ductus venosus. So right atrium empties a part of its blood into the left atrium through foramen veil and a part of its content into the right ventricle. So right atrium empties emptied into the right ventricle, a part of it, and a part of it is pumped into the left atrium. Okay, left ventricle empties its blood into the aorta, then from the arch of the aorta, blood flows into the upper extremities and head and neck. So left ventricular output, it is around the 45% of the total ventricular output, goes into the aorta, arch of the aorta. It supplies the heart through coronary circulation, supplies the brain and upper extremities through the branches of arch of the aorta. Then the blood in the arch of the aorta, it gets mixed with the blood of the right ventricular output via the ductus arteriosus, and this mixed blood with poor degree of saturation, rather deoxygenated blood or the mixed blood, supplies the trunk and the lower extremities and ultimately taken by the umbilical arteries to placenta through the umbilical cord for reoxygenation in the placenta. This is in brief about the fetal circulation. To recap, the placenta plays an important role as the function of the lungs in the fetal life for the gaseous exchange. From the placenta, the oxygenated blood is taken up by the umbilical vein, which empties its oxygenated blood into the inferior vena cava via the ductus venosus. And the inferior vena cava takes this mixed blood of the umbilical vein and the inferior vena cava, ultimately empties into the right atrium. Most of the inferior vena cava blood that comes into the right atrium, as I told you, is pumped directly into the left atrium via the foramen veil. That is the important aspect of fetal circulation. And other structure, that is ductus arteriosus, receives the right ventricular output blood via the pulmonary from via the pulmonary trunk ultimately empties into the descending aorta, which in turn supplies the trunk and the lower extremities. And pulmonary arteries take this deoxygenated blood to the placenta via the umbilical cord for reoxygenation. Well, one more important aspect of the fetal heart is it is the right ventricular dominant circulation. So the right ventricle is larger than the left ventricle, and the right ventricular walls are thicker than the left ventricular during fetal life. And pulmonary arteries, they receive the only 5% of the right ventricular output. So they are of less diameter when compared to that in the adults. Then this is in brief about the fetal circulation, and we'll touch on this particular slide, which shows the oxygen saturation at the different locations. That is in the umbilical vein, inferior vena cava, that in the right atrium, and the oxygen saturation in the left atrium, left ventricle, and the blood flowing into the upper extremities and the brain, and that in the descending aorta. It is around 70 to 80% in the umbilical vein. It drops down to 55% in the inferior vena cava. Okay, and the blood in the right ventricle is 55%, and that in the left atrium is around 65%, and the blood flowing to the upper extremities and the head and neck has got 65% oxygen saturation, and that in the blood supplying the trunk and the lower extremities is around 55 to 60%. Ultimately, this blood is taken by the umbilical arteries for reoxygenation to the placenta. This is about the brief account about the physiology and the oxygen saturation in a different parts of the fetal circulation. Yes, thank you very much for patient listening. Before we conclude, we touch on the changes that occur following birth. Following the first breath, an effective birth, pulmonary vascular resistance falls, and the right ventricular output mainly flows into the lungs. And there is increased venous return to the left atrium. Left atrial pressure rises and closes the foramen ovale. There is increase in the peripheral vascular resistance because placenta, a low vascular resistant organ, is cut off from the systemic circulation. And after birth, there is rise in the systemic vascular resistance. There is increase in the oxygen saturation and a fall in the prostaglandin levels. That results in the closure of the ductus arteriosus after birth. We can remember certain of the remnants of the fetal circulation. Foramen ovale remaining as the fossa ovalis, the ductus arteriosus remaining as the ligamentum arteriosus, and ductus venosus as the ligamentum venosus. These are the few points about the remnants of fetal circulation and a brief account of fetal circulation. Thank you very much for patient listening, and we'll meet again in the next class. Until that time, bye-bye.